Hello, Lucas Chaffee here with Kiko Chat. Today we're online with Mark Frischmuth, Executive Director of DemocracyLab. For several months has been doing some innovations in online hackathons, and I haven't seen any other groups innovating in that way. So we brought him on the show today to show us what he's doing, what he's thinking. Mark, thank you very much for being with us. We also have guests from around the world, Emmy and Maciek. Thank you for joining. This will be a very interactive conversation. Feel free to interrupt at any time, either in the chat or just audio with your questions. Okay, Mark.
Great. Well, thank you for having me, Lucas, and thanks for being here, Emmy and Maciek. So Democracy Lab is a Seattle-based nonprofit organization that has built an open source platform connecting skilled volunteers to Tech for Good projects. Our mission is to empower people who use technology to advance the public good, and our long-term futuristic vision is that technology enables our collective intelligence to solve the most challenging social, economic, environmental, and civic problems while empowering all members of our society. What we've seen is that the world faces lots of really big, really difficult, wicked problems, and that the way that we're trying to solve those problems right now isn't really working all that great. I don't think anybody on Earth would think that we're winning the battle against climate change. Here in the US, we're certainly not winning the battle against the coronavirus. Income inequality, structural and institutional racism, all sorts of really big, really difficult problems are in many cases just getting worse. And a big problem is that the average person feels helpless to do anything about it. They feel like these problems are too big. The actors who are affecting these problems are so out of reach that there's nothing that they can do. And so many people kind of drift into despair and hopelessness and feel like they have to resign themselves to being passive. We are trying to create a different mindset, a different way for people to engage and address these problems, and doing so by making it actionable for people to find technology efforts that advance the public good and feel empowered to make contributions to advance those efforts. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about what Democracy Lab does, and the platform we built, and the community that has come up around it. So I've gone to democracylab.org here, and tagline, make tech do good, we connect skilled volunteers and tech for good projects. Here are a few of the most recently updated projects on our platform. And these examples are a location-based donation service so that people who are experiencing hunger can find groceries that are about to be thrown away. This tool, Shelter app, that helps people experiencing homelessness to find resources available to them. Turn the Bus, a project that is building an Android app for low-income kids in India to improve their education. Now, these are just the three that were most recently updated, and we'll look at the big list. Kind of instructions on people who want to volunteer and people who are leading projects, a little bit more about the platform, and then a series of testimonials from different people who have used our platform and the results that they've experienced. And then we're helping people to organize hackathons, and we've developed a strong network of different community organizations that we partner with. And so what we have done, and I guess I'll dig just briefly into the way the platform works, and it is an open source platform built with the MIT license. And for anyone not familiar with open source software, it's the MIT license is probably the most permissive. It basically says that the software can be reused by anybody for any purpose. So this is a more complete list of the projects. You can see that we're still sorting by when they were last modified. But on this screen, you've got a robust set of filters that can help you find a particular project. So if you were, for example, a software developer, maybe you work on the back end, perhaps you are wanting to work in Python, and now we've limited that list down to 10 Tech for Good projects, and maybe you care about the environment. So now we say, okay, what is this Orcasound project, and what is it all about? And then what we have found in the research that we did a couple years ago, that there are a couple of common concerns when interviewing project leaders and volunteers. Project leaders said that the cost of onboarding new volunteers often exceeded the benefits, and volunteers said that project owners were often too disorganized to help effectively. And the insight that we took was that these were kind of two sides of the same coin, and that this problem of an inefficient connection between project leaders and volunteers could be addressed by nudging project leaders towards greater transparency. So in the project creation workflow, we encourage project leaders to list out and make open to the public all of the resources that they use in managing their team. So a code repository like GitHub, a file repository, this project uses Dropbox, many use Google Drive or OneDrive, a messaging service like Slack or Microsoft Teams, project management like Trello or Jira or WorkStreams, and then they can put as many other links as they want as well, and then list out the different skills that they're recruiting for, the technologies that they're using, and a place to list out the teams and to describe those positions. So this is just how the project profiles work. And in addition to project profiles, we just rolled out a new feature last week, which is relating to groups. We found that there are many Tech for Good organizations around the world, that many of these organizations have multiple projects that they're working on, but don't necessarily want to invest in building a platform like DemocracyLab to make it easier for volunteers to onboard to their projects. And so, as I said, we just rolled this out last week. So far we have Open Seattle on here, linking through to Open Seattle's GitHub repo, Google Drive, Slack Space, and Meetup, and then the 4 projects that are currently affiliated with Open Seattle. And so this provides an easy way for Open Seattle members to come and see the skills that are needed and the projects that are being worked on. Well, a couple of years ago, when we launched the very basic MVP of the platform, we had a platform connecting skilled volunteers and projects, but we had no projects and we had no volunteers. So a two-sided marketplace that was completely empty. And so to address this, we decided to basically throw a party and see who came. So we reached out to all of the different community groups in Seattle that were working on relevant projects, invited them to bring their projects on and to help us market the event. And that is where our very first event, the Civic Tech Volunteer Hackathon on September 22nd of 2018 happened. And you can see we had a great response. We had 226 people RSVP for the event. Probably 100 or 120 people show up. We didn't do a great job of tracking attendees at that point. We've learned a lot as we went. And this predecessor event was basically a prep session for project leaders to get ready for this volunteer hackathon. And the response was so positive that we decided this is something we've got to keep going. And so we made the decision to do these kinds of hackathons every other month. We decided that that was often enough that the projects could maintain momentum, but not so often that everybody would get burnt out and not be able to keep their focus on the work that they were doing. So you can see that a couple things. One, we've been doing them every other month. Two, that we never met a pun we didn't like. So we followed up with a hack to give thanks, and then we really started to get goofy with Hacky New Year, St. Hactrix Day, Hack for Your Mother right around Mother's Day. And then, there's not a great pun for the summer. So we did a summer solve-a-thon, and then the National Day of Civic Hacking organized by Code for America has been occurring in September. And then we just started repeating them. But between Hacky New Year and St. Hactrix Day, the coronavirus pandemic hit. And Seattle was the first ground zero for the coronavirus in the United States. And so as we started to see the progression of cases in late February and early March in the US, it became pretty clear that this was a big deal. This was really dangerous. Even though the case count was low, it looked like a logarithmic, it looked like exponential growth. And even though the numbers were low, anybody who's taken a math class knows what happens when they're doubling at the rate that they were. And so on March 3rd, we made the call to take our event online. And that proved to be a good decision. On March 13th, the governor of Washington declared state of emergency. I believe it was the same day that the president declared a national emergency. So, we were a little bit ahead of those declarations. And the great news is it gave us time to find an alternative. And fortunately, I had met Lucas and been introduced to KikoChat years before. I met Lucas, I believe it was back in 2011, and had participated in an event that used KikoChat back in 2019. And so I knew that the platform worked, and it immediately popped to mind as a good alternative for the events. And so we held the event using KikoChat, and we kind of wrote up a report summarizing our findings that you can find on our blog, how we organize teams of experts volunteering from home. And this kind of runs through the chronology and what we did and how we responded. It talks a little bit about the way that we structure our events and the way that we chose to partner with KikoChat, and a screen grab from the event. And we had at this event 145 people who participated, who checked into the room at some point in the day. We had less than that worked throughout the event on their projects. But it was, you can see that our high point in attendees was right as we launched at 100. This is the people who are actively participating in the Zoom meeting rooms. And then we, at the end of the day, is when people reported out their project. So this blog post just kind of covers some of what we did and what we learned during that event that we hadn't planned ahead on how to orient latecomers. We did not institute a project-wide communication tool during this event. So late in subsequent events, we've set up a Slack channel specifically for the event that has helped. I know Lucas is working hard on integrating Rocket Chat into the platform, so there'll be an integrated chat platform, and I think that'll be a great adaptation. We did a pre-event stress test, which was great. Just helped us identify just points of friction. They wouldn't call them bugs, but just points of friction that people were likely to experience. And that was very helpful in just helping us have front and center what things we needed to emphasize when we were orienting people to the event. And so I guess the next thing I'll show is our most recent event. What we did after that first event, the St. Patrick's Day event, is we realized that while we had pulled the event off the way we intended, we hadn't accomplished one of our objectives from the events. We do these events to make progress on the projects, but also to gain adoption of our platform. And because these events were on KikoChat, and when we were sending the instructions to people on how to participate, we pointed them directly to KikoChat, they weren't ever becoming really familiar with the DemocracyLab platform. And so what we did is we built an integration with KikoChat that allows us to have people come to our platform to learn about the projects in detail. And then when they're actually participating in the event, click through to an embedded KikoChat iframe. And so this has allowed KikoChat to basically white label their product for DemocracyLab. And so this is our event page for the event we just wrapped up on Saturday. And so we describe the event, the agenda, and then link through to the projects that have committed to participate. And so at the last hackathon, we had 18 projects that signed up to participate. And so these are just the project cards that provides a brief description of the project, the skills that they're looking for, and then anybody can click through to any of these projects and see that same sort of screen that we had viewed before that describes the project and the help that they need. And then when somebody is ready to participate in the event, they just click this green Join Event button, and they're then taken to an embedded iframe of KikoChat. And so what this allows, we post the agenda here that just provides instructions to help people get oriented to the event, a brief summary of all of the projects that are being worked on, instructions related to tech support and social media. And the way that we run our events, and there are plenty of ways to do events well, but for what we found works for us with our one-day events that we do every couple months is to have a pretty structured agenda. Our Hackathon Philosophy is a little different than some other organizations. What we are really trying to do is help projects make incremental progress and develop long-term relationships with their volunteers. One big difference between our approach and some others, we're really focused on long-term impact, which we don't imagine is going to happen in a hackathon. It's going to take a lot more sustained effort than you can get in a hackathon to have impact in the world. And because of that, we want to welcome projects at all stages of their life cycle. A lot of hackathons are structured around prizes. That's the carrot that is put out there to incentivize participation. And if you're going to offer prizes, you need to have a fair competition. The easiest way to have a fair competition is to say everyone has to start from zero. And so you can have no pre-written code. And if you do that, if everybody has to start from zero, then what you can hope to accomplish in the course of a hackathon is relatively limited. By not having prizes and judges, we don't have that restriction. Projects can start from wherever they are and make that incremental progress, and then report out what they've done at the end of the day. And really the outcome that we think is most important is the relationship between the volunteer and the project, which in many cases continues long after the event. In our post-event surveys, we find that typically about 80% of volunteers say that they intend to continue their relationship with the project after the event. So what we do, generally some welcoming comments and orientation, and then we do project pitches. So and the way we do it is we have every project do a 1-minute pitch. And we time that. We give them I didn't bring the didn't set up the little prayer bowl we use, but it provides kind of a soothing audible sound to alert people when they reached 1 minute. We make it less soothing when they've gotten to 1 minute and 15 seconds. And then we make it so annoying that they can't talk anymore at 90 seconds. So a little bit of leeway in their 1 minute pitch, but people generally are pretty respectful of those time constraints. So at this last event, we had 18 projects give their pitches. And then at about 9:50, we told everybody to go off into their team rooms. Volunteers can jump between team rooms using Kiko Chat if they have questions that they want to ask, and then encourage everybody to get started at 10. And if you're not familiar with the Kiko Chat platform, somebody can say, oh, I'm interested in the AV Street project. They click over here, and we've been able to embed their DemocracyLab project profile so people can have all of those same resources that we were looking at on the DemocracyLab event page here in the Kiko Chat iframe. And then we've also included a Google Doc that we encourage project leaders to fill out, describing the scope of work that they intend to execute during the event, and onboarding instructions. So here's the developer's guide, helping people set up their environment and get the tools that they need to get the work done. And Dustin's a pretty well organized guy. He laid out all of the tasks that he wanted, that he had scoped and set up for volunteers to work on, and you can see that he's crossed off the ones that got accomplished during the event. And then we also embedded a whiteboard feature. Not sure if it got used by this group or not. It does not look like they really did. But you've got some flexibility. You can have as many of these kinds of tabs as you want and embed as many different tools as you want that would be useful for teams. We also set up a bunch of extra rooms, just sort of overflow rooms. And the idea here is that if a team possibly has both developers and designers and maybe researchers, if you try to have all of those people in one Zoom meeting, you'd end up with a lot of crosstalk and it'd be extremely distracting. And so by having all of these extra rooms, we make it possible for people to go off and have sort of breakout side room conversations and then come back and rejoin the main room anytime that they want to.
Mark, I had a follow-up question about that. Have you seen, how would you say people move through the event? It seems like do they test the different projects, or after they hear the pitch, they say, this is the one I want to hear? And then are they starting to use those breakout rooms that you have for those impromptu conversations? What have you noticed about people moving around?
Yeah, I think that there are different kinds of people who show up to the event. Some show up already knowing which project they want to participate in because they've been posted ahead of time. And so the earlier a project is able to commit to participating, the longer volunteers have to review that project and know if they want to participate or not. Also, the more promotion our marketing team does of that project, when trying to encourage attendance. So there are definitely some incentives for projects to commit early. So for those people, they already know where they want to participate, and they can just jump right into that project room. Others hear the pitches and know by the time the pitches are done which project they're interested in, because they can they can click over and see, okay, what skills do they need, what technologies are they using, this is a good fit for me, or it's not, and they make that decision. I'd say that a minority of participants, maybe a quarter, will, by the time the pitches are done, they still have questions, and so they'll pop into a room, join the Zoom call, ask a question of the project leader, and hear what the answer is, then maybe go and ask, do the same with one or two other projects, and then make their decision. Once the event is underway, the breakout rooms are definitely used. The larger the team, the less feasible it is to have everybody in one room at the same time. So, and I find that the design and dev split is a very common one, that all the designers can participate in that conversation. All the devs generally can participate in that conversation, although sometimes you'll also see a split there between front-end developers and back-end developers. And you'll also see that if there are multiple design tasks being worked on, people might split that up as well. So it's just really on a kind of an as-needed ad hoc basis, but it proves to be useful. We probably are doing overkill on the number of rooms. I don't think we've ever had every one of those extra rooms filled at the same time. But in a way, that's the point, that you always want to have some excess capacity so that anytime people do want to have a side conversation, it's really easy for them to do so without leaving the KikoChat environment. Now everybody knows how to create a Zoom meeting or a Google Meet or whatever other video tool they want to. But if we can not give them a reason to leave the hackathon space, then they're more likely to stay engaged in the event throughout the course of the day. That is one thing we've noticed that's different about in-person events versus virtual events, is the barriers to entry and exit are lower at a virtual event. If at our in-person events, where we had some events that had great attendance. Our last event prior to the pandemic, we had 129 people show up at the Microsoft Reactor in Redmond, right across the lake from Seattle, and spend, most of them spent the entire day there. And that's great. But people are getting in their car or taking a bus or they're taking the train to get to that event. And once they're there, they're pretty unlikely to leave unless they really have something pressing come up or some other commitment. It's different with an online event. The plus is that people can come in from anywhere in the world and check it out. And we had projects from all over the United States. We had volunteers from around the world participating in the event. But the minus is they can leave at the drop of a hat, and that they are much more likely to experience distraction. So when you're in your own home, even during the hackathon, my daughters come into the room and they want my attention differently than if I had, physically gone to a different place and I'm just not there for them to engage with. So there are definitely pros and cons of virtual events versus physical events.
I like what you said very much about when you remove the prize structure, that everybody no longer has to start from the same spot, which would be the lowest common denominator. Everyone's starting from zero. So you have this sustained engagement over time. I think that's a great insight. I wanted to ask, are there things that you prefer in person versus online, or vice versa? Are there other things from an organizer's perspective that are easier or harder that jump out at you?
Well, I like in-person events a lot. You know, there's no substitute for that, just face-to-face interaction, being in the same room with a bunch of people, and the energy and the enthusiasm that people have. There just isn't a substitute for that. I think we've evolved over a very long period of time to be social creatures. Um, the thing I like about the virtual events is that it breaks down all the geographic barriers, that we don't have to be in the same place. So our in-person events, we still had some people who were coming from, who were flying in to participate, whose project was in LA or in Denver, to participate in the event. But it was, that was a big investment that they were making. They were really seeing enough value in it that they were going to spend their money and take their time to do all of that travel to participate. So the greatest thing about the virtual events is that it does allow for the community to grow outside of geographic constraints. I think the real challenge that we'll experience, the thing that will be hardest to pull off, is once the US gets the coronavirus under control, is trying to do both at the same time, trying to have events that we are convening in person and having a virtual component that allows projects and volunteers from anywhere to participate. So we don't have to worry about that right now, but that would be a great problem to have soon.
Absolutely. That was my next question. So I look forward to, as you started to design for that, I think many people are going to be very interested to see what you come up with, because you've got momentum in person and now you've got momentum online, because you've done multiple iterations since you do these approximately every 8 weeks. It's fantastic. I also am thankful from a Kiko Chat perspective that because you're from Seattle, you were the first group to come to us saying, we need to move something in person online, and we worked together, and you pushed the platform to be able to accommodate all the things that you needed. So I was very thankful that you were proactive about that, gave us a head start, because we hadn't gotten hit in New York yet. So I was very forward thinking. And I also like that because you've got a tech team, we're able to integrate Kiko and white label it. And we've been working on the best ways to do that with your team, who has been outstanding. And I think it's exciting. We're lucky to see your needs, because then other groups will eventually want to trade association will want to white label and put their conference inside Kiko. So Maciek, Emmy, did you have any questions after hearing what Mark had to say today?
Yeah, thanks a lot for that, Mark. I think, sorry. Yeah, it's very informative, and I really like the insights that you share around running hackathons, and completely agree with your comment on sort of removing that price structure and not having it. I guess my question is, so when we used to do this in person, there was a lot of I think the main value that our participants used to take from the event was definitely the people that they meet. And so to be able to have those, I think people call them water boiler conversations, and have those informal discussions and chats really help the bonding, and for them to establish sort of working relationships afterwards as well. So do you notice sort of how was that something that your participants sort of missed, or were they able to find some other ways to do those things with the Kiko Chat platform?
Yeah, I think that that definitely does happen. I think it happens less than in person. I know that when I'm at a conference, you're occupying a physical space, and if you're not talking to anybody, you might just turn to the person who's occupying the physical space next to you and strike up a conversation. And some of those conversations last 10 seconds, and others of them last an hour. And so it's that is really one of the real benefits of those in-person events. We have set up sort of social rooms in the Kiko Chat interface to try and replicate that. We don't really see people using them though. So I do think there is that networking that takes place, but I think that for the most part, it's happening within the project teams, and then also between the project leaders to some extent. So what we see is that once the team forms around a project, over the course of the day, those people get to know each other pretty well. And so they are building those relationships because they've been working together. The project leaders hear about each other's projects, and if there's something that they think is particularly interesting, then they're going to reach out and connect with the project leader, or maybe a volunteer who like more than one project, might reach out. They might say, well, I know this other person in my city who's working on something similar, and you should talk to them. So that definitely does happen. What I'd say doesn't happen is just those moments of, I don't want to call them boredom, but just those like unscheduled moments, like between sessions, where you just kind of turn to the person next to you and say hi. So I think that is something that is difficult to replicate, and would probably you probably need something that is much more like a sort of VR, AR, walk around in a headset sort of experience to try and do that, which seems like an awful lot of overhead for a pretty small benefit, in this context.
I got some good news about that. There's a team in France that has this open source tool called Work Adventure, which we have experimented with embedding into Kiko. And maybe for your next one, Mark, we put it in, but you can kind of like walk around here. And then when you walk up to people, you pop up on video with them. And then when you're done talking with them, you go in here and meet with these people. It's groups of 4 can be on video together. I'll set it up for you next time. And people have, here's the water boiler.
That's pretty funny. I wonder if, it looks kind of fun. I wonder if it's worth it or not, though. Just in terms of you can accomplish the same thing in terms of the video conversations with your existing interface, but this is gamified. People might like it.
For a hackathon,
we'll have to play with it and see what we think.
Yeah, and I think if it's just the 15 minutes, the 15 minutes before the event begins, this space is open, and then people come and they bounce around, and then it's not going to work for some people because of different browser settings, but they're not going to miss anything. They'll just go to the main room. They can meet you there because it's in browser. I think there's some browser restrictions, but it's the most innovative platform I've seen that does this so far. And well, anybody, just reach out to me, hello@kikochat.com or lucas@kikochat.com. I'll make sure this is set up for your next hackathon if it's helpful. So great question. I think, Emmy, that's a fantastic question. And yeah, that's Mark's answer. That's an area that needs some new research, development, and innovation across online platforms for how to really get that done well.
And one thing I suppose that also could be done, I think there's a tool out there called like Chat Roulette or something like that. if I'm remembering, it has it's not used for good purposes, I think. But inside, that could be something that would do, if you wanted to have like a networking part of the event, something. And I think that particularly, like, you're talking about doing a 2-day event. We're pretty constrained in our timeline. But if you're doing a longer event for 18 hours a day, people need a break. And so having a session that's like for, dedicated, period of time, maybe it's 20 minutes, you're going to have 4 or 5 minute conversations with randomly assigned people, who are at the event, something like that could be interesting or fun. That might be a way to capture a little bit of that experience.
Maciek, did you have a question?
Yeah, why not? Maybe are you somehow affiliated with DevOps community, Mark?
You're asking, am I?
Yeah.
No, but we need to be. We have one of the positions that we just started recruiting for is a DevOps position to help on our platform. As our users have grown, we're starting to see that we have a greater need for DevOps expertise than we used to. And so we're actively seeking help in that area.
Cool. Mark, any closing thoughts?
Well, I would just say thank you for the opportunity, Lucas. It's fun to be able to share what we're doing, and I'm happy to chat more with either of you, Amir or Maciek, to talk more about this if it makes sense. And my email is mark@democracylab.org. So anybody watching this later is welcome to reach out as well.
And I'll say that any organizations that want to run online hackathons, reach out to Democracy Lab, ask them what they could do for you. If you want to get a bunch of your enthusiasts on your mailing list turned into active volunteers, Mark and his team are experts at that, and I highly, highly recommend them. Thank you very much for the interview today, Mark.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. Have a great day, all.
Sure do.